This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody. Billy Embody. 1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. It is that time. I am Billy Embody. We've got an ACC Championship preview to go through. This is wild. It doesn't feel real. Somebody asked me about this, Hayden, a couple of days ago. I don't know what day it is or what day it feels like these days, but how are we supposed to feel? Like, how do you go with SMU has been on this incredible run? This is the most incredible season since the days of the Pony Express. No disrespect to last year's season. It just is. And you think SMU can beat Clemson, but it's Clemson. Can you beat Clemson? And you wrestle with this whole thing that we're going to talk about for the next however long, but it all comes down to this, and you've got to enjoy this moment that we're going to get to watch unfold live in person Saturday evening.
That's the thing. Enjoy where we're at right now. You have no idea what the future holds for college football, for SMU, for anybody. And so, look, anybody who hasn't bought their ticket to Charlotte next, do you have a crystal ball? Do you know when the next time that this is going to happen? Because I don't. And so you wouldn't catch me at home this weekend. I will be there. I will be there up top. I'm sitting in section 3 something, so I can watch the overhead view like a true O-lineman would. But ACC Championship week, cannot believe we're actually here. We're talking about this. We both said our ceiling for this team was 9 wins, and they proved us wrong. We're here at 11-1, a chance to win 12 games for the first time in program history this weekend. So 8 o'clock Eastern at Bank of America Stadium, where the Panthers play, we get to take on the Clemson Tigers, the gold standard for this conference for the last, call it 10 plus years. And look, this is the biggest game in SMU history. And before you bust out the pitchforks and try to pull me out of this seat, I know I've said that 4 times this season with Florida State, which it was, first ACC game. Undefeated Pitt, it was, control your own destiny. UVA, it was, clinch the ACC spot. And look, this week is for real. Could play for a national championship if you win on Saturday, and it's as simple as that. You win, you get a bye in the college football playoff, and you're 3 wins away from a national championship. And get to go to Atlanta, play in the Peach Bowl, and lose. And I think we're still in, but I worry about the SEC bias so far this year. And number 13 in the AP poll, South Carolina, they're waiting on somebody to slip. We don't have the college football playoff rankings. This is being filmed on Monday night. So we got to go with what we got, which is the AP poll for now. But also Miami has been ranked over us the entire season. They're waiting in the wing. And I think the committee, until the committee's hand is forced that they have to put SMU at the number 3 spot, I worry because you can't leave this thing up to chance.
Yeah, and speaking of chance, if there's a chance you're thinking of missing this game, we got to remind you guys to use our friends at Status Jet to go to Charlotte. And they can fly you in the day of the game and back for under $40,000. And you say, oh my God, that is insane. Well, divide it 8 ways, make it work. Hotels are ridiculous. Flights are ridiculous. You're in and out same day. You could be home in bed the next morning. It's a good way to do it, let me tell you. And Status Jet is SMU owned. David Henry and his team will give you a discount when you mention On the Pony Express. So treat it as a once-in-a-lifetime trip. Use Status Jet. They're proud supporters of SMU Athletics as well as the On the Pony Express podcast. We appreciate their support. And also, we've got to remind you guys to make sure you fly in time to make our live podcast in Charlotte. We're at Clutch Kitchen and Poorhouse, 601 South Cedar Street, right near the stadium. The event starts at 12:30. The podcast starts at 1:15. Hayden, myself, Bill Armstrong, some special guests we're working on are going to be there at Clutch. We're going to have free drinks, That's Wells, beer, and epic wine being poured when you go to ontheponyexpress.com. Buy your ticket. It's right there on the front page of the website. Join us for $40. It's going to be one hell of an event. It's going to be a once in a lifetime event. You can grab some food there if you want to, but you can get your wristband with $40 and drink as much as you want. We'll take care of you with a great podcast that leads right into the SMU Virginia basketball game. There's no better way to start your day, or maybe continue your day, in Charlotte before the ACC Championship than with a live edition of the podcast with myself, Hayden Howerton, Bill Armstrong. The whole crew will be there in Charlotte. So check that out. Again, on the Pony Express, epic, everybody coming through for us to make that happen. What a fun event, a huge response as we're recording this. We're already up. This has been posted on the website for maybe 2 hours since we started recording. We've already got 30 people signed up and a bunch of verbals. Yes, on it. When my kids go to bed, I got you. And we're recording this on Monday. Our goal is to have at least 200 people there. It's a huge venue. It's kid friendly. It's where the Panthers pregame tailgate is. So come through, see us, and we'll be talking and sharing some last minute thoughts on SMU Clemson. And let's get to that game, Hayden, before we get all riled up about our live podcast. Let's focus on this one because this is our moment to break this game down, a huge one in SMU history as they face the gold standard of this league.
The gold standard, the gatekeeper, whatever you want to call them, it's the Clemson Tigers. 21 ACC championships, most in the conference. Next closest is Florida State with 16. If SMU wants to announce its return to blue blood status, there is no better team to beat than Dabo Swinney's Clemson Tigers. But let's get to know Clemson as we do every week with a new opponent for SMU. Started football in 1896. They were introduced to the sport by a gentleman who brought it over from Auburn, Alabama. This is the 128th season of Tiger football. And look, they won 6 conference championships in the Southern Conference before becoming one of the founding members of the ACC in 1953. And head coach Frank Howard, which I'm sure sounds familiar, won 8 conference championships between 1940 and 1967 as head coach of the Tigers. And he's a perfect example of what it means for Clemson football to be who they are today. Howard's Rock was a piece of quartzite found in Death Valley, California, and given to head coach Frank Howard as a reference to the stadium's nickname of Death Valley. But the rock wasn't always placed on a pedestal, the big, pretty rock that it was. It was a doorstop in Coach's office until 1966 when Coach was talking to his team, and he told one of the boosters, throw that rock over the fence, in the ditch, get this thing out of my office. And the booster, being funny, placed it on a pedestal at the east entrance of the stadium. And then when Howard talked to his team before the next season, he said, look, if you guys give 110%, you can touch the rock before you run down the hill. But if not, keep your filthy hands off of it. And so that's how Howard's Rock was established. It's really cool tradition in college football. Can't wait to talk about the stadium whenever we do go to Clemson next year. But you can't talk about Clemson if you don't talk about the Dabo Swinney era. Dabo became the head coach of the Tigers in 2008, and he's really credited with revitalizing the program. He surpassed Coach Howard's win total as Clemson head coach last season. Swinney has 179. Howard has 165. And Dabo's won 8 conference championships for Clemson after taking over a program that was good, and he made them great. 4 national championship appearances, 2 national championship rings, and he's now the second highest paid coach in college football at a cool $11.3 million a year. But look, you got to talk about his coaching tree a little bit too. And while it's not a Nick Saban coaching tree, he still has Tony Elliott, Chad Morris, Brent Venables, Billy Napier. I mean, he still produces head coaches under his leadership. So famous Clemson alum, you've got quarterback Trevor Lawrence. You've got 85 Bears nose guard William Refrigerator Perry. You've got Dwight Clark, the receiver of the catch for the 49ers. Eagles DB Brian Dawkins, also known as Weapon X. DeAndre Hopkins, Sammy Watkins. ACC Network host Eric McElwain. We'll hopefully see him this weekend. And then former South Carolina governor and U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley are all Clemson Tigers. But their current situation, they're 9-3. They're 6-1 in ACC play. Their losses are to Georgia in week 1, where I wrote Clemson off, as did a lot of other people. Then they lose to Louisville at home in week 10. And then last week they lose to their arch rival, South Carolina, and they just still find a way to get into the conference championship and still find a way to win close ball games. This team has championship DNA. And Billy, I'll tell you, this is going to be a tough out on Saturday night, but I think this Clemson team is vulnerable. They had to come back versus Pitt. They let that Louisville team run all over them, and they allowed a Virginia team to score 35 points on Clemson's defense.
Yeah, this is a Clemson team that you kind of wonder which one's going to show up. It might have been a little bit of like how we talked about SMU early in the season, right? Okay, they had the BYU game. They didn't play well against Nevada. That was before all of the different changes that have gone on with this team. You beat TCU, you beat FSU, and then you go into Louisville and you're like, okay, road test, first one, what team's going to show up? And SMU showed up, showed out. And meanwhile, Clemson dropped that game at home. And it didn't look that close either. So I think this is a game that is very winnable, very gettable for SMU if they do the things that are trademarks of the good side of SMU football. And that's where this last season that SMU went through, winning the AAC, and even you look back on the growing moments of 2022, and it's all kind of been building to this. You know, it's that short drive over from the hotel that they're going to go through that they've not done before for a game like this against a team like this. Other than that, once they get there, they've played in big stadiums before. They've played in weird stadiums before. They've played in cold. They've played in against teams that have plenty of talent like FSU does. They've faced Oklahoma. They've faced, Boston College in a weird Fenway Bowl. They've seen a little bit of everything over the last 2 years. And when that coin gets flipped, all that's going to matter is focusing on doing your job. And that's the interesting piece about this, is that Clemson is well coached. That is very much a part of their DNA, is do your job, focus on you. And which team is going to be able to push the battle or the scale the other way is the one that's going to be able to execute their game plan and execute their jobs individually as a team the best.
Like it comes down to every week in college football. And the whole do your job thing, that was Bill Belichick's motto. That was the Patriot way, as they call it. But it really is the truth. If you go out and you're the best version of yourself, Billy, if you're the best Billy Embody on Saturday, that's all we can ask from you. We don't need this team to come out here and be somebody that they're not. This team has already proven that when they play their best, when they play up to the standard, they can beat anybody. And I truly believe that. But you got to start with Clemson's offense here, led by Garrett Riley, offensive coordinator. SMU fans are going to be familiar with him. It's going to be a familiar offense. Saw that 2 years on the home sideline at Ford Stadium. Saw it 1 year on the purple sideline as he was the offensive coordinator for TCU in the 2022 season. Yada, 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 65-7, something about that. But this Clemson team, we'll get to their stats. Total offense, 8th. Scoring offense, 14th. 16th in passing, 28th in rushing, 11th in turnovers, 47th in sacks is their one Achilles heel if you had to have one. But this is a very talented offense for Clemson. They've got a lot of players who are going to play on Sunday. And you got to start with Cade Klubnik, the junior quarterback, 6'2", 210, highest graded Clemson player by a mile on PFF. 3,045 yards through the air, 63% completion, 29 touchdowns, only 5 picks. That's what makes him special. This guy takes care of the football really well, like his life depends on it, which, hey, ball security is job security. And if you want to play on Sundays, you can't be turning that rock over. But senior running back, number 7, Phil Maffa, 6'1", 230. This guy is a load. I mean, he's a bowling ball. He is really tough to bring down. 201 carries, 1,078 yards this season. And what stands out to me, 670 yards after contact. You're going to have to drop this guy in the hole. You cannot bounce off of him and let him get to the secondary because he's going to be gone. But you know what? He hasn't had the load that he had earlier this year. His production dropped from 18, 19, 26, 30 carries to 3 against the Citadel, 20 for only 66 yards against South Carolina. So I'm hoping that's the version of Maffa we get this week, because this run defense should be able to shut him down and play physically up front and the way that they have all year long. But if we let him get going and they get comfortable and they're letting him get to the linebackers, it could be a long night. But this offense lives and dies through Cade Klubnik and the receivers. 3 receivers of over 500 yards. You got Antonio Williams, Bryant Wesco Jr., and TJ Moore. 17 touchdowns between the 3 of them, with Williams leading the way with 10. And then finally on offense, I got to talk about the offensive line. And I don't do it very often, but this is a unit that really stands out. Junior right tackle Blake Miller, 6'6", 315, 39 starts, only a junior. Former freshman All-American in 22, All-ACC last year in 23, and I think he's the best offensive lineman on their roster. This guy could be a franchise right tackle for somebody in the NFL. And then at left guard, the senior Marcus Tate missed 3 games with a knee injury earlier this season. He came back against South Carolina, but he didn't look the same. But really no one did against the Gamecocks. But he hadn't given up a sack since week 10 of 2022. It's a long time, over 2 years. But that's another guy that brings a ton of experience and talent to Clemson's offensive line. And we're going to have to win up front against these big boys. This is an offense that I think is really talented. I think it's really dangerous, but we'll see what Scott Simons is able to cook up.
When I look at this Clemson team, I kind of mentioned it a little bit in the early going, but you got a team that is kind of, again, which one are you going to get? Are you going to get the one that's, played against Georgia and gotten, kind of blown out? I know the game was close at half. Are you going to get the team that, played Louisville at home and lost? Are you going to get the team that didn't show up for the Palmetto Bowl with a great performance and lost 17-14? And all of that to say, against good defenses, this team really struggles. They really struggle against teams that can impact their offensive line and game plan. And those are not good numbers. Basically, against top 25 teams, and I'll include Louisville in there, they've scored 21 points or less in those 3 games. And against Pitt, who's also in the top 25 at one point, 24 points. And they had to come back in the final moments to win. They scored 24 points on the road at Virginia Tech to win 24-14. So there's 2 things here. There's the offense, which one is going to show up against a very good SMU defense. And it starts with Cade Klubnik and him producing. And it also, you look at what Phil Maffa's done. He's been hurt. He's nicked up. You mentioned Marcus Tate being nicked up. That's huge. And that's where not having a bye at this point of the season to try to, have this type of a game be maybe a little bit more even from a health perspective can really hurt. But Cade Klubnik, he's from Austin, he's from Westlake. SMU did recruit him. I think they were one of his first offers. I don't know if that was Red or if it was Garrett when they were here or whatever, but I'm pretty sure it was Red. He's a class of 2022 guy. So SMU does have familiarity with Cade. That's part of the reason why they recruited him. TJ Moore is a really talented wide receiver from Tampa. But then you've also got a guy in Bryant Wesco who, really showed up for Midlothian and finished as a 5-star. And SMU offered him, had him on campus once, I think. They were never really a factor. In my opinion, they did offer too late. That was a guy that, unless you're under a rock, he was one of the freakiest guys out here in the state of Texas pretty early on. But he was just raw. He was in a triple option offense. Well, he's been able to show up for them this year as well in spurts. So you look at this team and you see stars, you see talent, and that is across the board. And I think they are better coached, obviously, than Florida State and that type. But I do relate them similar in terms of they're all going to look like they can get off the bus with any NFL team out there, and they'll fit in. But what team are you going to get offensively when throughout this season they've not shown up against a good defense? That's a huge question.
I think that plays into our strength, and you can't even underestimate how well this team defensively has played on the road. We were at the Virginia game where they gave up 7 points. They go to Louisville and they take over the fourth quarter. And so if this game is close towards the end, I have full confidence that the same thing is going to happen, that this defense is going to wear down this front. And that's something that, man, if I had said that 3 years ago, sounds insane to say that SMU's front is going to wear down Clemson. But I really believe we've got the horses for this thing, no pun intended. I think Clemson is always going to be talented, but I just don't think they have the confidence or the swagger that they did at one time when they were going to the playoff every year. And it was a guaranteed thing. Billy, I'll tell you what, expectations breed success. When you know that you're going to play for a conference championship, for a national championship, it just makes you a better player because you have all this confidence under your belt because of your preparation, because of what the community expects of you, what you expect of yourself. And lately, Clemson hasn't had that. They've kind of fallen a little bit to the wayside. Obviously, they're still playing for an ACC championship. Can't take away from them the job that Dabo Swinney has done to get this team back on track and get them in the big game. But it's not the dominant Clemson team we once saw.
Yeah, it's not. And all that to say, it's kind of like how we talked about Miami when we thought Miami was going to play SMU. Like, look, they've got Cam Ward. They've got all these athletes, but they're bad defensively. They've shown that. Cam Ward throws interceptions, and they showed that. Well, Clemson so far, and it was similar to almost how we talked about Florida State going into that game. Okay, yeah, they sucked, but they had just coming off a win against Cal, and you were kind of like, okay, all right, now what team are we going to see? And I'm not trying to compare the two teams and their success this year, but the reality is they do have athletes, they do have size, they have all those things. But what's been put out on tape this year has not been great against really solid competition. I mean, their best win is a comeback in the fourth quarter to win 24-20 against Pitt. So, and we know what SMU did to Pitt. We know what SMU did to Louisville. That doesn't mean SMU is going to win this game. But in terms of confidence, and I think this is ultimately a thing that plays into the defense pretty well, they've got to feel good about maybe teeing off a little bit on Clemson.
Yeah, defense is the weak point for this Clemson team. Play caller is Wes Goodwin, 12th year across 2 stints at Clemson, but total defense, 57th, scoring defense, 30th, not bad. Passing is 47th, and then what I have highlighted and something that SMU is going to have to take advantage of, 73rd rushing defense in the country. 150 yards a game given up by this Clemson rushing defense. Turnovers, they have 23 turnovers forced on the year. That's good for 11th in the country. And then they're pretty good as far as rushing the passer. 31 sacks on the year for 31st best, 2.58 sacks a game. And so impact players, got to talk about sophomore defensive end TJ Parker. 6'3", 265, a first off the bus kind of kid. You know, you said it. 11 sacks so far this year. But he's also really good against the run, too. He's able to set edges. He's able to make tackles. He only has 4 missed tackles so far this year. This guy's Clemson's highest graded defensive player. And you love that when your highest graded and your best defensive player is a guy at the point of attack who's going to wreak havoc on every play, and he's always going to have to be accounted for because this guy's a game wrecker. You know, and he's a young kid who keeps getting better. We're going to see this guy next year when we have to go to South Carolina, and he's going to have another offseason. But you know what? We'll talk about that when we get there to next year, because I'll talk about the senior next, and that's linebacker number 0, Barrett Carter, 6'1", 230. Not crazy stats. He is their leading tackler with 68 on the year, 4 sacks, 2 PBUs, and Dabo Swinney called him, quote, one of the best players I've had in 20 years, end quote. So that by itself was enough to make me put him on my impact players list. Another guy that you're going to have to Mike Zero, you know, a few times and really understand where this guy's going to go. And he's going to fit runs weird, and he's going to stick his nose in there and try and make some plays. And then their best coverage guy, safety number 9, RJ Mickens, 6 foot, 210. This is a guy from Southlake, and he's an NFL legacy guy. His dad played in the NFL. He only has 1 interception, but 7 PBUs, 4.5 tackles for loss. They're not really throwing at him a lot, but when they do, he makes plays. A lot of talent is on this defense, and there are multiple NFL caliber players. But like we said, I'm just not sure if they're going to be able to piece it together on a consistent basis. They give up 35 to Virginia. And we know what that offense looked like, Billy, when we were there just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and Anthony Calandria is in the portal now after that game, and looking for a fresh start. So, again, and maybe I don't know how our viewers are going to listen to this podcast and feel. I don't know how our predictions are going to make people feel, but it feels like to me right now that we feel pretty confident in this team. And look, why shouldn't SMU fans, SMU, this team, and then us covering them, be confident in what they can do? And there are good players on Clemson's side of the ball. There are some great players. And there are some guys that I knew as recruits that you looked at and you were like, oh my God, this kid's going to be around a long time playing this game. And that's what they have. And that's the reality of it. But when you look at what their body of work is, and I keep going back to that, it's a team that I think, and now rightfully losing to South Carolina, even though it would have helped the ACC out a lot. I mean, they're not a college football playoff team unless they win this game. And then all of a sudden they are. But that's where SMU has to take matters into their own hands. They have to take the fight to them. You talked about on the last podcast how SMU starts pretty well in the first quarter. You talked about how SMU finishes well in the fourth quarter. And I think the big thing for this game will be SMU's offense attacking this Clemson defense in the back half of that second quarter. That's where SMU has actually picked up some points in this season. You look at the BC game. Look, interception. Okay, cool. We'll go get the ball back. We'll go take it down the field and score. Get a field goal. There are other areas of this team where they've been able to capitalize in those moments. That's why, 12 points, over 12 points a game in the third quarter or in the second quarter. That's where you can get somebody on their heels. And then all of a sudden, Clemson is playing from behind. They're playing catch up. And Phil Moffitt is nicked up, but they, do like to run him. Well, if they go one-dimensional and SMU can tee off on Cade Klubnik, yeah, he can move around. He's athletic, but he's not going to be somebody that, really kills you with his legs. In fact, if that's what SMU forced him to do, I think if you're Tibbs, if you're Scott Simons, this defensive line, if they can get them into the one-dimensional kind of mindset and playing from behind, man, I would be having them tee off on him. He's got, let's see, he has 437 yards on the ground this year, which is pretty solid. He's been able to move the ball with his legs, but again, he's just not, that's not his MO necessarily. I think that's also part of the kind of focus of this team. Like South Carolina, 62 rushing yards for him. Phil Moffitt wasn't getting much. Louisville had to run around and make plays, 43 yards. He had 41 yards against Pitt. Just kind of chunk plays, but then add 70 against North Carolina State. They're a bad football team. If Cade Klubnik is around 40 yards rushing, let him. That's fine. If that means Phil Moffitt's struggling, if that means his team's throwing and he's picking up first down here and there with his legs, fine. But he's not going to go out there and kill you with his legs like, we would have thought Thomas Castellanos would have done before the season.
Yeah, we talked about preseason how running quarterbacks, might be an issue for this team. And we've played multiple up to this point, and we've been able to hold them to pretty much minimal gains, where, yeah, they're going to pick up a first down here or there, but it's no Kevin Jennings, 59-yard rushing touchdown against Louisville, And so,
Yeah.
Look, my keys to the game for this, and SMU is a team that really, as long as they don't beat themselves, they'll win this game. But before I get to my keys to the game, you just reminded me real quick of the second quarter right before half, and Chad Morris, which I know we've poked our fun from time to time. He said the most important minutes of any football game were the 4 minutes before and the 4 minutes after halftime. You take the ball right before half, drive in a 2-minute drill, and score is huge. Get the ball after halftime, drive down, score again. That's a 14-point swing. And so SMU has been great before the half. I just want to see that same fire when they come out of halftime, and if they win the toss and defer, get the ball out of half, drive down the field, score a touchdown, put this Clemson team on their heels. But look, my keys to the game, and this has been the formula for success for SMU all season. Defensive line must win and do what they do against Clemson's front. What does that mean? I've got 4 yards a carry or less, and they rushed for 4.3 against South Carolina, and they were still held to 14 points, and 3+ sacks. I think if you break this offensive line's confidence early, that is going to be massive for this team. In 2021, when we went to Cincinnati, I had like a few thousand snap streak without giving up a sack. And on the first third down, I gave up a sack, and it was all downhill from there. And so if we're able to go get a sack against one of these two big guys, the rest of the team will look to their two leaders as vulnerable, and that will help us. Cade Klubnik, my second point, has to commit a forced error. If he's allowed to stand there and pick us apart, it's going to be a really long night. And so I think at least one turnover by this SMU defense is going to lead us to victory. I think Club Takeaway has to also get on the plane because they haven't been consistent in road contests. And so you go get one in Clemson's backyard, silence the crowd a little bit. I think that's going to be big. Third, clean game from KJ. You cannot start the game the way that the Tulane game did. And I hope defense will dominate the same way that they did this time last year. But Clemson's a lot more talented and more explosive than Tulane was. And so 0 turnovers, 63% completion for KJ. And then I'm not going to put a yards number on him because I think this could turn into a running game, which is my fourth and final point. Rush for 170 plus. This is the 73rd ranked rushing defense versus what was at one point a top 20 rushing offense. The ground game has been hurt the last couple weeks by the performance. We've had less than 116 yards a game the last 2 weeks, but we've been trying to manage Brashard's injuries. We've been trying to just get ready for this game. And so we need Brashard to return to pit form when he went off for 161. And so I hope he used the extra reps off during Cal week when he said, here you go, freshman, go get some reps to McFall. And he's going to have to shoulder the load this week. It's going to be a big week for Brashard Smith.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, the X factor, the guy who's got to get it done this week is Brashard Smith, and Kevin's got to take care of the football. All those things have to happen, and I think I feel pretty good about Kevin taking care of the football. I do, but SMU's run game has been faced with defenses selling out to stop them. If Clemson does that, and again, they're not a great run defense, but neither was Virginia. Cal was respectable. They did a good job. But, I mean, they've got to hit a couple explosives, like big runs, that you showed on the last podcast, one of those great design. Everybody blocked it up well on the left side for Brashard, and it was big gain. That's what SMU needs to hit a couple of. That'll really get Clemson on their heels. That'll build confidence to that offensive line. I think when you look at that, we'll always bring up this game. The TCU game where you guys put up 350 yards on the ground, there was an attitude and a mindset that once it really got rolling, it was unstoppable. And against the Clemson defense that statistically is not good stopping the run, that's something that needs to happen. They've got it really. I think there is an aspect of oh man, here we go again. We're facing another good team, and they're rushing on us, or they're doing this, or Kevin's made us miss 25 times. He's looking like Lenore Sellers back there. All of those things can impact how Clemson responds, because so far against teams that are, good this year outside of Pitt, they really haven't, responded in the right way. They've had close games, but you've got to make plays when they count. And so far this year, that's why Clemson is on the outside looking into the college football playoff. This
is just a legacy game for seniors, for Rhett Lashley, for Scott Simons, a guy that, when TCU came to our house in 22, they put up a really good performance offensively. And so I know he's hungry for some revenge for that game. And that's what I think the difference is. And I'll get to my prediction here in a minute. I think SMU is starved for an opportunity like this, to where Clemson is just kind of, we made it back. We're back in the ACC Championship for the 9th time, where it's, I think this SMU team is hungry. I think the seniors are obviously coming off of an emotional day this past week on senior day, get a big win, get some guys in the ball game, to where it's now this is going to be a war, where it is everything you've got for 60 minutes. and you'll have the next 3 weeks off if you win this game, where you don't play until New Year's Eve or day, depending on which game you get. And so, do you want to go ahead and get to predictions?
Sure. I'm going to scroll down and read yours first.
All right. This was tough. I mean, I had this game as an offensive shootout at one point. I had this game as a defensive battle at another. But overall, I do think this is the best team we've played so far this year. I think they would beat BYU. I think they take that spot. But you want it that way to win a championship. And this championship is not going to be easy. I'm not saying the Tulane game was easy last year, but this one is certainly going to be harder than that. We're going to be in Clemson's backyard. I looked it up. It's 2 hours and 14 minutes from campus to Bank of America Stadium. SMU has to come out of the gate swinging and, again, ready for a war on Saturday, because that's what this game's going to be. You know, Dabo's hungry to return to the playoff, yes, but SMU has been starved for an opportunity like this to go win a national championship, and finally that opportunity is here. You know, I believe in Kevin Jennings in big games, and there has not been one bigger yet in his career. I think Scott Simon's Legion is going to find a way to get it done late in the game when we need to stop. But I think overall they're going to find a way to make Clemson one-dimensional, you know, and yes, I think Cade Klubnik is going to find the end zone at some point. Obviously, he's a good player, good passer, but I think SMU's offense is going to be able to match whatever Clemson does. But overall, I think defense shines for the second straight conference championship. And look, Eric McElwain and I had this conversation on the Boulevard. He is never going to pick against Clemson, and I am never going to pick SMU. So I've got SMU 28, Clemson 24.
Well, look, I think this is a really tough one to pick. And I think listening to your prediction and the point number, I'm going to go a little higher for SMU. I'm going to go a little lower for Clemson. And I think if SMU wins this game, I think they win it by 10. And two different pieces of that. I think SMU's got to hit 30 points. That's kind of been that sweet spot. They've found different ways to win and things like that, and it's looked different. But to beat Clemson, I think they need to win 31-20, 31-21, something like that. That would mean that you've probably ran the ball at a good, pace. You've been able to get to the end zone a consistent amount of time throughout the course of a game, and your defense has played really, really well against one of the top offenses. And that 21 points outside of the Pitt game, that's the highest Clemson scored against a good defense. So that's the type of performance SMU needs. And I think they have the ability. I think they have the team. I think they have the depth. I think they have the coaching staff and game plan to do that. I do. And so that's my prediction, 31-21. Got SMU by 10. I know the line has gone kind of a bunch of different ways, like, 1 point favorite SMU, 1 point favorite Clemson, back all the way to 2.5 to SMU. Like, it's been all over the place a little bit. But, I mean, if SMU is the team that we've seen since Kevin Jennings is taken over as a starting quarterback, they're going to take care of business against Clemson. And I don't have much worry about that. What I look at is, will they be able to avoid critical mistakes in the key moments? And you know what? As you found out last year, you can have a fumble on the opening play and you can bounce back and go on a run and take a lead and do all of those things and go win a game. Because football is a 60-minute game. It's going to be a 60-minute war, like you said. I got SMU 31-21. When the chips go down, cards go down, everything like that, SMU is going to be able to pull this one out. And for all the reasons that we've seen throughout this year, they play a really strong brand and to a standard on defense, and they make super complementary plays on offense. They find ways, even when things aren't going well, to eventually pick it up, get a key score, keep rolling, go win a ball game. That's what it's going to be about. They've played in a bunch of different stadiums. They played in a bunch of different, weather. You look back at that Nevada game to start the year. It was potentially going to snow at one point. It was snowing early in the day. You had the Fenway Bowl last year in the muck. They even won it on a nasty night in New Orleans last year. So they've done it a bunch of different ways on different playing surfaces as well. I got SMU 31-21, ACC champs, and punching their ticket to what is likely going to be the Peach Bowl.
I'll leave y'all with a quote as we wrap this up, and this is by Sun Tzu. He will win who prepared himself waits to take the enemy unprepared. And so the reason I bring that up, Clemson was defeated 3 days ago at the time of recording. They walked off the field hoping that Miami would lose, but realistically, I think most people would have picked Miami to beat Syracuse. Clemson had lost control of their own destiny in the ACC since October when they lost to that Louisville team who we went to Louisville and beat. And so, look, Clemson has been watching and waiting and, maybe, hopefully. SMU has manifested this day for 40 years. This is just another ACC title opportunity for Clemson. And it is hard to come into a championship game with a lot of confidence after you lose to your arch rival at home. And so SMU got to prepare, strategize, for 2 weeks for an ACC championship, while Clemson found out 7 days before kickoff, exactly, after a loss, that they have to play another game. And so I think that this opportunity is going to be seized because of the expectations set by Rhett Lashley about joining the ACC and knowing how far we've come from the dark days. I think you have a much greater appreciation for playing in this game because of those 1-11 seasons, because of those get stomped by Tulsa on senior day, where it's just embarrassing back then. And the sun has risen on SMU football, and it's just our time at this point. I don't think we're going to be denied, and this win is going to be for every SMU Mustang out there.
We'll be there to follow it all. And I tell you what, Hayden, it's kind of wild. I mean, now the last, as this podcast actually goes live, we're recording a couple days earlier, but I mean, to think about, in a couple days from now or a few days from now, we're going to be packing up to go to Charlotte. We're going to have our live pod, which again, you can still join us there. And it's going to be one of those days where, you're going to remember what you had for lunch, where you went, who you were with. You're going to remember watching our live pod, you, me, Bill, Dean. We'll get it. The whole crew up there, maybe some special guests. And then you'll remember what you do after that, watching SMU UVA, and then going to the SMU tailgate at Clutch, or staying at Clutch and going through their tailgate party, and then getting into the stadium. And maybe you get in a little early, even though it's nasty and cold and all of those things. And you just take it in, because this is such a surreal moment that doesn't come around very often. And if SMU wins, you're going to do the exact same type of thing for the Peach Bowl, in what all likelihood, Peach Bowl. And if not, you're going to do it in New Orleans, I would hope. And we'll talk about that, and that'll be interesting. But there are days when you cover a team, there are days when you're a fan that you remember every single thing about it. And I'm sure as a player too. And this is going to be one of those days on Saturday. And I think you look at how much this staff cares about their players. You look at how much these players care for each other, and it just stands out. And I know Dabo cares about his players. Eric's talked a lot about that when we've talked with him, and Red has a ton of respect for him and things like that. But you can see that realness that SMU has at this very moment, the perfect storm of that. I think that's another key piece to carry the day.
It's going to be unreal. I can't believe we're here. I mean, I think I said there was a possibility that we could, maybe end up in Charlotte. I'd have to go back to the week 1 pod, but I mean, just my goodness. I mean, what a season, regardless of what happens on Saturday. I mean, the future is bright, but God, I hope they take advantage, man, to win back-to-back conference championships, one in a power conference over a blue blood. SMU's freaking back, dude. And it's unreal to watch.
All right. We got to leave you guys with a reminder here. Christmas is coming up, and I would tell you to order this now for your friends, for your family. But this is not what I'm wearing right now. But I can tell you, our boy Jonathan McGill, this is as clean as it gets. This Stinger jacket from Mizzen in Maine is just A1. A1. It is warm. It is, rain resistant, and it keeps you just perfect temperature. And it doesn't even feel that heavy, but it does keep the warmth in pretty well. It's starting to cool down in Dallas. It is a pretty price point there. But I tell you, I have one. They sent me one. It's the best. And I'm wearing the button down, which is also super, super nice. Really enjoy that from Mizzen in Maine that they sent. over to me. And look, I don't have a discount to offer you on any mizzen and main gear. I don't have any of that because of the licensing. But what I can tell you is they do an incredible job with their product. They were started by an SMU alum, and it's the best shirt around. Fits well, breathable, all those things. So check them out for your Christmas gifts for all your friends, your family, whoever you've got. Appreciate our friends at Mizzen Maine hooking us up. And look, Hayden, we've got a lot to enjoy this weekend. So we hope you guys do it as well. Our listeners, we appreciate you guys. It's been a heck of a ride. We know this isn't the end. We know there's a lot more to come for this SMU football team. And we hope to be doing it about a month from now with a bye in the college football playoff secured Saturday night, 8:00 Eastern, 7 p.m. Central on ABC. SMU takes on Clemson for the ACC Championship. Let it sink in and follow us, all of our coverage at ontheponyexpress.com. You can join now for a special, and we'll get you all lined up with all the coverage. But for Hayden Howerton, I'm Billy Embody. Enjoy the game, everyone. This one's going to be a good one.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU on3 and on Instagram at on3SMU. And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.